Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Let me stop that. That's enough of that old nonsense. We don't need that in our lives. How are we doing? Good to see you. I just want to say a very quick thank you. We'll come to it in a second, but I just want to say a very quick thank you to all of those that tuned in last night and for your very positive reaction. I know Talking Head films are not always an easy watch, but I was really pleased with that interview with Robin Rushforth and Cormac McLean. I do think it put a different spin on the whole explosive demolition process. We will be hearing more from PDC in the very near future. I do want to show a few bits and pieces over in the chat. The chat started at, let me see, where is it? I think Dan Cullen was here about 8:15 this morning. I've no idea why, but he actually says, what a fantastic show last night. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. Gary Muirhead on the same subject. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, guys. Thanks again for another award-winning show last night. Yeah, I think the award must be in the post. It was really interesting, informative piece of broadcasting. Well done, Team Demolition News. Thank you very much indeed for that, Gary. Bruno Demolition just joined us over on Instagram. Good morning to you, fine folks. Thank you for being here. What do we got here? Jim Turner is in the house. I'm fairly sure I saw Mark Whiting as well. Mark Whiting is here. Alex Latham is here as well. As Gary Muirhead pointed out on last night's show, last night was obviously the first of our Breakfast Show After Dark. That's what we call it. Breakfast Show After Dark. First episode of 2025. But we have more. On Monday next week, I don't know how this has come about, but I've got, I'll do this show, and about half an hour after this show ends, I'm doing a recorded interview, which I'll be playing in an evening, and then I'll be doing something else, and that'll be played later that week in the evening as well. So lots and lots of evening stuff coming up, so keep an eye out for that. Ken Hatcher is in the house. Morning, Ken. Thank you very much indeed for being here. I do need to check my emojis to see if there is one for gusts of wind, because apparently we get it tomorrow. I've been a really positive response to the article that I wrote yesterday and the thing that I did about the storm warning. Obviously the financial and economic storm, but also the storm of. They've given it a name, and I can't remember. Is it Ewan or Aowen? Or it's got a weird name, but there's a storm brewing, and it's coming this way, and it should make landfall tomorrow. So if you're out and about, please do brace yourselves for that. Loads to get through today, and I did flag this up last night, and I kind of like your feedback on it, really. Morning Monologue today is about whether the construction and demolition industry or construction and demolition equipment industry is ripe for a disruptor, like an Elon Musk in the car industry, like a Jeff Bezos in the retail industry. Could we see somebody just pop along and say, plant and equipment, I could do that better? Could we see that? Be interested to see what you make of all of that. Dan Cullen, that's fantastic. Looking forward to seeing the evening shows. I just wish I could clone me or find a presenter, because what I do is very, very straightforward. But I've got to say, doing 2, 3, and sometimes 4 of these things in a day kind of does you in. Apparently, the name of the storm is Uoin. I mean, Dan, I'm going to take a wild stab here because it is an odd spelling. I take it this is an Irish name, is it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But yeah, looking forward to the next evening show, the Breakfast After Dark. Not so much looking forward to the storm. Anyway, all of that will be coming in the fullness of time, because first of all, we do need to get this show on the road. So I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this one on the road. Before we go any further, I do need to say a very quick good morning to Mr. Ford. Good morning, Skins, he says. Morning to you, sir. It's a pity we don't see more of Fred in front of the camera. Maybe give you a break. He has plans for Balmer. he does have plans for Balmer of getting in front of the camera. We'll see. We will see. I don't think we'll ever see him doing this. Even though he's much better equipped, he's better looking than me, he's better spoken than me. He'd be much better at this than I am, but yeah, he's no intention of taking over this anytime soon. Anywho, yes, it is Thursday, the 23rd of January. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition. So in today's show, Hydrema keeps on trucking. OilQuick is the perfect partner for a cat track loader. Rhinox is throwing shapes, and we've got some mega mining for you as well. And as I've already suggested, plus in Mark's morning monologue, is the equipment industry overdue for some large-scale disruption? But before we get to all of that, we do have the Mystery Machine to take care of. So, Mystery Machine will be along immediately after this. Yeah, very quickly, clarification from Dan. Apparently the storm is Eowyn or Eowyn. Selected alphabetical alternating between male and female names. I know the system, but is that the best they could come up with? And does it sound scary? You know, to my mind, you know, and I realise the alternating and I realise the alphabetical thing, but, you know, if there's a really big storm coming along, you'd want to call it, you know, Storm Beelzebub. Storm Gilgamesh, Storm Dave, Storm Nigel. Sorry, Nigel. That just doesn't. It doesn't, does it? Anyway, Mystery Machine. Haven't changed the colour today, but I can tell you it is not a current machine. So cast your minds back just a wee bit, people, and see if you can figure out what this is. There you are. I'll give you a very, very big clue. It's an excavator. But apart from that, I need a make and a model. And I don't know if I'm not sure if Peter is actually in the house at the moment, but Peter was very, very precise yesterday. I'd like to be equally precise today. I will accept no substitute other than the right answer, because otherwise he'll be shouting at me. While you're figuring that out, I do need to remind you of today's question of the day, which looks like this. Yeah, question of the day today is this. Do you have or have you heard any really good work nicknames? This is prompted. I see on Instagram from time to time an Aussie podcast or a radio station that upload loads of these over on Instagram. For example, they had one guy call in. Apparently they worked with a guy with a very pronounced limp, and he was known as the Sniper's Nightmare. And there was also a guy with half an ear missing who was known as 18 months because he was an ear and a half. That's what I'm looking for. I can tell you, I used to work with a guy. In fact, for a short while, he was my boss, and he was known in our office as the pilot light because he never went out. A journalist that basically never left the office. Yeah, the pilot light. But I'm looking for more of those. Have you got any of those? Either ones that you've been called, people you've nicknamed yourself, or any that you've heard along the way. Love to hear from you. The more obscure, the better. Let us know in the chat. Here's a quick reminder of our Mystery Machine. Let me show you a smidge more. Doesn't really give too much away, does it? As I say, not a current model, but keep the guesses coming if you would be so kind. I'll be back in just a moment with the first of our films today, which features Hydrema. As you will see, though, on this show over the months and years that we've been running it, Hydrema is more than a one-trick pony. However, there is a product for which they are best known, and it looks like this. I once saw one of those very early doors when they first made landfall here in the UK, and it was working in the centre of London, doing some work on a canal, or kind of an... Do canals have tributaries? I'm not sure they do, but it was like an offshoot to the canal, and it was working... I was partially submerged. I mean, the water was only about yay deep, but you could not have got anything else in there. It was one of those you say, oh, yeah, okay, I see it. I see exactly what you're doing there, and it's absolutely fantastic. So, Hydrema, good morning to you fine folks. Thank you very much for your fine work. What do we got? Guesses on our mystery machine. Ken Hatcher is going for the Daewoo 220 LC. It's good, but it's not right. Gary Muirhead reckons the Samsung SE210 LC-2. It's not one of those. Dan Cullen reckons the JCB 807. It's not one of those either. Let me show you a bit more. There you are. Now, for me, that would put me on the right track. Kind of my era, this. That would have put me on the right track. But, yeah. If anybody's got any thoughts on that. And Ken Hatcher says they're not tributaries, they're feeder canals. Thank you. They probably are. In fact, I'll take your word for it. I'm sure they are. Too shallow to fish. So I'm not particularly interested in the canals themselves. I'm a happy man on a canal. But yeah, Dan Cullen is also going for a Priestman Mustang M120. It is not one of those. But keep the guesses are coming thick and fast, if you would be so kind. While you're doing that, I'll do this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Do want to say let me get rid of that. Do want to say a very quick thank you to Jim Turner, who sent me a video this morning. I saw it 30 seconds before I was due to start the show. Jim, I'll drag it into the show probably tomorrow if I can, but thank you very much indeed for sending that over. What have we got here? Hang on a minute. I've kind of lost my train of thought. There we are. That's the mystery machine. We've got Hyundai Robex 200 LC. On the right path, but no. Dan Cullen saying the Samsung SE350. It's not. Chris Ford going for Atlas or Daewoo 210. And Ken Hatcher going for the Hala 220L. It's not. But both you and Gary are very much on the right path. For those of you that know your history, Hala became Hyundai. There's a kind of crossover. That's where we are. I need a make and a model. All will become clear when I reveal it, or when somebody says, no, in actual fact, don't even need to go any further. Our reigning champion, the mastermind, the veritable mastermind of all things Mystery Machine, Dan Cullen. It is... I've got it listed actually as a Hyundai Hala HE280 LC, because as you'll see, it is an HE280, which is sort of Hala nomenclature, but it's also got the Hyundai badge on it. So let me take, congratulations, Dan. Let me take your name off the screen so everyone can see it in all its glory. There you are, the HE280 LC. Well done, Dan. Another 3 points. I know you missed out yesterday. No, that's... I've actually put my own name against that. So 3 points to Dan. I don't think he can be caught. I think somebody might be able to tie with him at this point, but I don't think he can actually be overtaken. So it looks like I owe him 3 prizes. The first 2 are sat down here. I promise they are. So yes, I was promising you something else. OilQuick. I don't know about you, and maybe it's just my narrow mind, but when I think of OilQuick, I tend to think of OilQuick hanging off an excavator. But obviously, OilQuick do more than that. They also partner rather well with a traditional Caterpillar machine, like this.
The OilQuick system has absolutely changed our company. Instead of having multiple machines, multiple crews, we're using one piece of equipment to do multiple jobs on a given job site. So the OilQuick system is a wet coupling system, meaning that your hydraulic connections couple from inside the cab. So we've invested heavily in a lot of technologies that make our job more efficient, make our operators more efficient, therefore make our projects more efficient. OilQuick couplers would be a perfect example on how we're trying to reduce the time that it takes to hook up something as simple as hooking up attachments. A product like OilQuick can reduce minutes, if not hours, on a daily basis. Making sure that we have the right equipment to do our job is of the absolute most importance. And that's why we've spent such a heavy investment in a lot of our attachments, a lot of the OilQuick, a lot of the GPS, to make sure that we can interchange our attachments more frequently on the job site. So we're using the right tool for the right job at the right time. We have a general purpose bucket. We have forks, and we have the best thing ever, which is a 6-way dozer blade that we reached out to AMI and got a ton of help and support with building a complete from the ground up design. Now we're able to take the already versatile track loader, add the 6-way dozer blade to it, and be able to do all sorts of functions around the job site, bulk material out, and then come in with that dozer blade and do a very fine grading application. We're getting the best of every single world that you can possibly get, and you have all of these fantastic tools to help do the job.
I know truck loaders have kind of fallen out of fashion a little bit. Does that not give them a whole new lease of life? In my opinion, it does. Chris Ford, I sense a conspiracy here, by the way. Chris Ford says, bloody phone keeps ringing. Every time the mystery machine comes on, it's as if they know. I reckon that's Dan Cullen. I reckon the mystery machine starts, and I think Dan phones everybody to distract them while he searches through Google and gets the right answer. Far be it from me to accuse Dan Cullen of cheating, but mate, there does seem to be a pattern emerging here. AK Demolition Man over on Instagram have just joined us. Good morning to you. Thank you for being here. I will move on in just a moment, but if you were watching, not the show last night, but if you were watching Demolition News or LinkedIn or Facebook, you'll know there was an incident up in Glasgow yesterday in which a building collapsed while it was being demolished. At the time that we reported it, I think we were the first off the mark, as per usual, when we reported it, couldn't ascertain exactly which company had been on the site at the time. And we were kind of led down the garden path because there was if you see one video, there is actually a Metropolitan Demolition sign in the foreground. It's not their site. They are actually working next door. I'm being told that the company responsible is a company called Bardem, based up in, I think they're actually based up in Scotland, in Glasgow or thereabouts. They are, but they're based in Paisley. Let me clarify that. I'm being told it was Bardem, and apparently on the site they had an Austin Wilkinson high reach on hire. And I literally, while I was talking just now, I've received a text, and I can't verify this, but we know that a van was crushed or damaged when the building came down. I am being told that the van itself was actually an Austin Wilkinson van, a brand spanking new van. Can't confirm that, but that's what I'm hearing. So that's literally bang up to date as well. Dan Cullen, yes, denying it all, obviously. Chris, not me, honestly. Lol, he says. I get messages too, but I've got my tablet watching too. So get your tablet, Chris. Yeah. Chris, keep taking the tablets. I've got more to show you, haven't I? We've just done OilQuick. I think we've done did we do the FOSS thing? Never mind. Let's just move on. Shaping buckets. Shaping buckets. Anybody use the shaping bucket? Anybody feel like using a shaping bucket? If so, Rhinox have got you covered, like this. Right, sorry, I was just distracted, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. Well, I'm going to say very quick good morning to Magnusum over on Instagram. Imagine if Demolition Acquired got a low taper fade. I don't even know what that means, but good morning. Good morning. Ken Hatcher says this, the old track loader. I drove a Hanomag about 1,400 years ago. You're not that old, Ken. I reckon I've got a couple of years on you. Chris Ford says, Dan, I might even get back at the office next week. Then it will be game on. Dan also says, I use the V-shaped buckets for drainage. He also says that bucket doesn't make any sense. But the reason I was distracted is because we've had the prodigal son, or one of the prodigal sons, has returned like a phoenix from the ashes. Good morning, Mr. Ed Butler. How the devil are you doing, Mr. Butler? Great to see you back. Hope you're fitting well. Hope the family's fitting well. Hope your sidekick, Mr. Williamson, is very well. Great to have you back in our midst. Hasn't been quite the same without you. I've got one more thing to show you. Bit of mega mining. But I'm going to have to drag that off my hard drive. So let me play you this while I get that fired up.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Gary. They're all following the Scandinavian way. It goes back to what I was saying a couple of days ago about this notion of, go and have a look. And I'm not necessarily saying you guys. Obviously, you're at the coalface, and you have jobs to do. But you would think that your plant managers and your specifiers and stuff will be leaping on planes. Be like the football scouts going to Holland to find out why they're better at electric than us. Go to Scandinavia to find out why they're better at attachments and buckets than us and stuff. Would you not? Just me? Okay, we've got some mega mining to show you. As I say, do need to get this off my hard drive. Let me fire that up. I'm sure I called it mega mining. There we are. Just enjoy. shouldn't have ended quite so abruptly, but I think we enjoyed that. I do need to do a bit of a correction here. I completely misread Ken Hatcher's earlier comment. He said, the old track loader, I drove a Hanomag. It was an L400 years ago. I said about 400 years ago. Obviously, he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about an L400D, a Hanomag. Yes, I need to slow down just a touch. Just going back, Dan Cullen enjoying the tune. Chris Ford, you're absolutely right. Do you remember that? Back when porn was less available, let's say. Yes, you're always on the lookout for the Scandinavian. Swedish porn was the way forward back in the day. Now, going back to quick hitches and stuff, that's because tilty hitches not equipped to suit the heavier bucket, says Dan. However, Mr. Muirhead comes back and says, you're very wrong, Dad. The tilt rotator will take any size or type of bucket or attachment and will still operate the same as a standard hitch, if not a lot better. Work smarter, not harder, he says. I know Dan's made this point before. Be cool to have operated those big machines. Be a bit monotonous after a few days. I feel like trucks or driving. One of the things that struck me, and I know Chris Ford says here, he says about some machines there, three pass loading of an absolute monster truck. But the amount of time that you lose in that sort of setup, you know, particularly, I mean, I know you can't help how far you have to haul material. So if you've got to go from face to dump site or to crusher or whatever it might be, there's not a great deal you can do about that. But the very fact that they have 2, 3 or 4 big trucks sat still, burning fuel, waiting for the guy in front of them to be loaded, you'd think there'd be a better way, wouldn't you? You'd think there'd be a better way. What do we got here? Dan says, be nice to sit in that huge cab, probably have their own microwave and kettle in there too. Wonder about a bed. Yeah, I wonder. You know, I've always quite fancied that. Not here, because driving here is an absolute bloody nightmare. But you know that you see those big Australian road trains or the big heavy goods vehicles over in the States, you know, big fancy cab, but with a bed behind. I like sleeping in small spaces. I really quite fancy that. If all of this goes away anytime soon, if the Breakfast Show goes hideously tits up, that's where you'll find me, behind the cab of a truck. Chris takes you to put the show on its tits up. Yeah, absolutely. Huge conveyor belt could be a thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, it does happen in some places, and I mean, the argument used to be the fact that you can't move a conveyor belt. Obviously, you can now because they've got them on wheels on tracks, and you can move them around. I guess if you're constantly blasting and the face is constantly moving, it is a ball ache. But I think at a time when you're focusing that much on the amount of fuel that you're expending to win materials, looking at an operation like that where you've basically got, and I dread to think how much fuel one of those big trucks burns in an hour, but the very fact that some of that hour is spent just sat there idling away, and maybe that's another excuse for going all electric or something very similar to it. Who the hell knows? I don't. Maybe somebody needs to come along and disrupt the industry, which is quite a nice segue into my morning monologue. So that's about it for the main part of this morning show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, do please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues, and I hope to see you again very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be right back after this. Bookshops. They were once a mainstay of high streets and shopping malls up and down the land and across the world. Many people, myself included, could while away the hours browsing the new releases, looking admiringly at the covers, wishing we had both the time and the intelligence required to consume all the classics. And we did so whilst breathing in that heady aroma of paper and ink that marks bookshops as unique. And then one day, our heads were turned. A man called Jeff Bezos believed that the feel and the smell of books were less important than the cost and the convenience. He was right. So right, in fact, that he then brought the same level of convenience to other items. And pretty soon, he had single-handedly redrawn the retail landscape while rendering bookshops and even entire high streets redundant. In my old house, we had a kitchen drawer that served a single purpose. It was used to house takeaway menus. Depending upon the prevailing mood within our household, we could delve into that drawer and with nothing more than a phone call, satisfy our cravings for Italian food, Indian food, Chinese food, Thai food. That drawer was a gateway to a global culinary feast. All those menus are gone now. They've been replaced by an app, which means we don't even have to negotiate those tricky telephone conversations in which you try to correctly pronounce the names of foreign dishes without being racially insensitive. And then, of course, there's Elon Musk. Setting aside the somewhat interesting way that he salutes a US presidential inauguration, Musk revolutionized not just the automotive industry. He's very close to eating NASA's lunch too with his SpaceX program. Whether it's Jeff Bezos and Amazon, Elon Musk with Tesla and SpaceX, or the creators of Uber Eats, these individuals and their companies have targeted a market sector and in a very, very short space of time, turned it on its head. They're what we now know as disruptors. Disruptors have changed the way we buy our groceries, gather and consume our news, listen to music, watch movies. You only have to look at the UK's dying high streets to see the impact these disruptors have had upon the entire retail experience. Which begs the question, is the construction equipment industry due for a disruption? The sector is worth billions of pounds, and deliberately or otherwise, the incumbent manufacturers have left the door ajar. The household names of the car industry sat on their laurels, assured that their petrol and diesel powered models would feather their respective nests now and long into the future. Many in the field of demolition and construction equipment have done likewise. There are outliers, of course. JCB with its pioneering work in the field of hydrogen power, Liebherr's giant leaps in autonomous mining equipment, Volvo's exceptional work in the sphere of emissions reduction, and Bobcat's remarkable embracing of technology. But in many instances, the sector has become slow and intransigent. Like the oil and gas companies trying to squeeze every last dollar from their commodities before those commodities are outlawed, some manufacturers are sticking stubbornly to diesel fuel, to machines with cabs that we're increasingly struggling to fill, to producing machines that are good for a single but very short life that can't be effectively remanufactured, rebuilt, or resold for a decent price. Against that background, the door isn't just ajar for a disruptor. It's wide open. And there's an all are welcome sign hanging outside as well. Now, conventional wisdom says that the barrier to entry is too high, that it would be impossible for a newcomer to make a significant impact in the field of demolition and construction equipment. I beg to differ. If Elon Musk can disrupt the automotive sector, then the equipment industry is there for the taking. And let's not kid ourselves. Some of the equipment on offer today is extraordinary. Each excavator, wheel loader, each dozer, it's an amazing feat of engineering. But at heart, they're an engine, a transmission, and some hydraulics, arranged in what we currently believe to be an efficacious manner. All of that could be very easily replicated, improved, or entirely replaced should someone have a mind to do so. If the machines of the future are to be fueled by something other than diesel, the engine expertise currently within the sector will be largely meaningless. If our machines are ultimately driven by servos and motors, there'll be no need for hydraulic knowledge and expertise. That too will be redundant. And I see it like this. The industry has been travelling down the same road for a century or more, but it's come to a crossroads. Many companies will choose to continue down their chosen path until it's no longer environmentally permissible or economically viable to do so. Some will turn left and head down the road marked electric. Some will turn right and take the hydrogen road. But there remains a very real possibility that as current manufacturers slow as they approach this vital junction, someone new could enter the race, like an F1 car on fresh tyres storming out of the pit lane. They could be nimble enough and hungry enough to catch and potentially overtake those industry veterans that are weighed down by history and that obdurately continue down the road well travelled. Now, whether that's a good thing Remains to be seen. If a disruptor does enter the race and makes things better for customers, for operators and the environment, I'd welcome them with open arms. If, however, the disruptor shows any signs of megalomania or a weird way with a crowd salute, then I'm out. There's my thoughts. Love to get your take on that. Could we see somebody just arrive out of left field and just upset the market? That's what I'd like to know. So going back to conveyor belts, there's a conveyor belt in Hertfordshire, 2 miles from the quarry to the screener. That's a fair old lump. HS2 of a conveyor belt at 1.7 miles long. Yeah, I remember. I think we may have covered that here, actually. Yeah, I'm not. Did you see that JCB had won a new machinery award yesterday? Did I? I can't. I'm not sure I did. I'll go and look that up. I will go and look that up. Going back to my point on the this disruption thing. The construction equipment industry globally is worth billions. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, what is Caterpillar now? $100 billion or thereabouts? You know, it's a vast company. So there's plenty of attractiveness. That's not a word, but you know, if you landed from Mars, or if you're in an allied business and you look at it, there's quite a lot to go at. And would they need to go for everything? Possibly not. You know, the mining industry, I think that would be the toughest bit of all. But you know, if you could come along with a new way of doing mini excavators or smaller excavators, yeah, I really do think you could absolutely disrupt the market. And what would it take? New form of fuel, new technology, Jim Turner's pet one, modular design. Because if you think about the model that we have today, a lot of it is basically going out of fashion. Diesel is going out of fashion. Regardless of which term we take, diesel is going out of fashion, no question about it. So if somebody can come up with a better alternative in a short space of time, brilliant. Similarly, and I hate to say this, but human beings in a construction environment, and particularly operating construction equipment, are slipping out of fashion. Not because they're bad, but because we can't find enough of them. And if we can't find enough of them, then remote controls, or more specifically autonomy, will be the way forward. There's a huge amount of work being done on autonomy in other fields of endeavour, not just construction and demolition and quarrying and mining. There are others. So if somebody's got an autonomous model, could they then bring that over to here and really disrupt the market? That's... See, this is precisely the sort of thing I was talking about. I feel young Cormac will disrupt the explosive demolition industry, has a good head on his shoulders. Now, bearing in mind, and I know he comes from good stock, you know, he's from good people, but he's 23 years old. He's potentially got another 40 plus years in him. If he can maintain that passion, and if he can maintain that forward-thinking approach, you're absolutely right. He could disrupt not just the explosive demolition industry, as you know, very specifically, but the demolition industry as a whole. You know, some of the stuff that he was talking about, you know, the being able to blast small blasts, but in major cities. You know, whenever I speak to any of these TV companies, you know, we'd like to blow up a building in London. Well, no, that's not going to happen because they're all too close together. And however, you know, to take out foundations, there's a lot of basement work still going on in London. You encounter a bit of rock or something like that, you could quite easily do that with explosives. I think it's a new way of thinking of things. Look at the industry we have today. You know, we already know we don't have enough operators. So autonomy is starting to make a lot of sense. Diesel fuel will go out of fashion, so electric and hydrogen is starting to make a lot of sense. And also thinking about the equipment itself. I remember having a long conversation. Sadly, guy no longer with us. One of life's good guys, Richard Comley, down at Comley Demolition, and he was basically pointing out the fact that when you look at, he was talking specifically demolition equipment. If you look at it, it's very much inspired by nature. If you think about a high reach, looks not dissimilar to some sort of, a brontosaurus or a giraffe. If you look at the way that attachments work, it's like a finch's beak or something like that. But is that the best way? Is that the best way? Or is there somebody out there that could come along and say, actually, we could do that better? And I know, and I reported on this, Jesus, 20 plus years ago, I would have thought. There was work being done on microwave technology, so you can actually aim microwaves at concrete, and I think it basically heats up any water vapor that is trapped within there, and when it gets to the right temperature, it cracks. That was talked about 20 plus years ago. It's as far as I know, it's never been commercially used, but that exists. Is cutting steel with steel, that's me cutting steel with steel, that's not me using chopsticks, is that the best way? Is there something we could do with lasers? Going back to one of the points that Cormac made last night about cracking the concrete off of steel, you end up with a mesh of steel rebar. As it stands at the moment, it's snip, 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 snip. What if you could just do a laser like the one from Goldfinger, although not aimed at anyone's crotch? That's the noise a laser makes, by the way. Just straight through the whole lot. There you are. There's all your steel on the ground. And you want that in proper lengths? Okay. There you go. That's not me farting, I hasten to add. But there must be other ways. One of the things that inspired this is the fact that where we are today as an industry has been the result of evolution. And I say this a lot about demolition equipment in very, very specifically. Think about a high-reach excavator. It is based on an excavator, and that excavator was designed, by some incredibly clever, smart people, and it was designed to dig down. And the demolition industry has come along and said, that's all well and good, but we want something that works that way. Is that the best way? Is that the best way? Think about the number of incidents and accidents that we have involving falls from height. So why do we not devise something that requires nobody to be at height? Devise some kind of mechanical, autonomous, remote control system that basically keeps men and women on the ground and sends equipment up yonder. Would that not be a better idea? And some of the most exciting things that I've seen in this job in recent years are those things that come out of left field. Despay's top-down way system. Basically encapsulating an entire demolition site, completely protected from the elements, but also from the drop, putting that on top of a demolition, on top of a tower block, and then gradually bringing the site down with you. Nobody can fall off, no debris can fall off, no machines can fall off, everything is contained. That is some sensible thinking. Think about the heads-up display that Bobcat have been working on, where you've got your screen is basically a television screen, but it's see-through effectively, so you can see what's going on site. You're looking out of a window, much as you would now, but you've also got all of your machine readings and everything else. All of that is on your screen, but you're looking through it. So rather than having your cab cluttered with a screen for this and a screen for that and a screen for something else, everything is contained within that. Your cab is in completely clear. And particularly when you think about the kind of machines that Bobcat make, mini excavators and skid steers and compact wheel loaders and compact track loaders, where you haven't got a lot of space in the first place. To take all that clutter and put it there on your display makes perfect sense. It's completely left field, but it makes perfect sense. How much more could you do? If somebody came along, if we could go and dig up Isambard Kingdom Brunel or somebody like that and say, okay, here's construction, or here's demolition, or here's quarrying. We're not going to show you the equipment we have today, but we want you to come up with a way to dig a hole, to cut steel, or whatever it might be. What are you going to come up with? Do you think they'd come up with the same answer that we have today? Do you think an excavator of today would look the same if it were designed from a completely clean sheet of paper? And this is not accused. I mean, I do think the oil and gas companies are sitting on their hands trying desperately to eke out their living while they still can. I don't think that's the case with equipment manufacturers. But when was the last time you saw an equipment manufacturer take a proper left turn? Think about, excavators, and it always makes me smile when we do this on the Mystery Machine. It's an XYZ-4, an XYZ-5, -6, -7. All of those are just basically, here's a thing, here's an iteration of it, here's an iteration of it, here's another iteration of it. And some of those iterations are, they've changed the engine from stage 3 to stage 4 or whatever it might be. They've gone from diesel to electric. But by and large, you look at the machine, it's like, if you took off all the decals, you look at it and go, well, is that a -5 or is that a -8? It's really, really hard to tell, because all they are is an evolution. When was the last time we actually had a revolution? When somebody came along and went, there you go, get your eyes around that. That's different. I genuinely, I'm struggling to think of anything. And with that, when you think about the car business in particular, and I realize there's more to cars than pure aesthetics. When I was a kid, I was never a petrol head, never have been, never will be. But when I was a kid, you could look at a car in profile, from side on, and, you could tell it was a Rover, or, there was just something. All cars looked very different and very distinctive. Obviously, Minis and VW Beetles were very, very different anyway. But no two cars looked the same. The Ford Cortina looked different to the Ford Granada or whatever. The Capri was a very distinctive shape. If you lined up a dozen cars side by side now, I don't think I could tell them apart. Now, I realise that some of that is out of necessity, in that they've been designed for optimum aerodynamics and to house modern engines and modern gearboxes and drive lines, and I understand all of that, but they are all very, very similar. And in absolute truth, you'd be hard pushed to tell the difference between a Ford Focus from 2020 and one from 2025. You really would. When was the last time that somebody came along and went, something new? And when you think about that, as somebody like an Elon Musk, look at that. They're all doing exactly the same thing. And they're not just doing the same thing once, they're doing the same thing time and time again. A Ford looks like a Toyota looks like a Nissan looks like a Peugeot, and so on down the line. And for somebody to sit there and go, we could do something different. And I don't think a Tesla looks overly different, but the very fact that it is basically an iPad on wheels, and it's electric powered, and it's very, very fast, and it's silent, and you can understand, even though over the recent years they've had issues with product quality, and I do realise that Elon Musk is an absolute bumhole. He really is. But you have to say, him and his team have looked at the market and gone, we did it different. We could take that. Is there somebody out there now looking at the plant industry and going, we could have a bit of that, or we could have a big lump of that? And you wouldn't need to take it all. Where is the volume? The biggest volume, I guess, would be mini excavators. But if you could come up with something of the equivalent of a 14, 15-ton excavator, or maybe a 2.5-ton excavator, but was different and new and modular and electric or hydrogen or autonomous or something like that, you could really give this industry an absolute kick in the pants. Is there somebody out there looking at that, I wonder? It's nothing to do with this, but I'm actually speaking to a company at the moment who are building machines, not in this country, but they're building machines. And I have to say, the thing that drew me to them is that they look and I mean this in a positive way. This is not a criticism. They look like something designed in the 1970s. They have a real like retro vibe to them, but they're either hybrid or they're electric powered. And I'm due to speak to them next week. I'm looking forward to showing you those because they, to my mind, it's like, now that is something different. Is there somebody else out there? Could a Tesla pitch up here or somebody like it? As I say, there's billions to be made. Why would they not? Why would they not? What do we got here? Chris Ford says, conveyor belts can be the bane of my life. If it's wet, they slip. If it's cold, they freeze. And they bloody rip. They do that. You see, even things like that. Even things like that. Conveyor belts do rip. Could we not come up with something better than that? Stuff that doesn't rip? Or do you remember those, what were they called? Those weird tires that didn't Airboss. Do you remember Airboss? Anybody else remember Airboss? They were like a modular tire. I mean, tire is a weird way to describe them. I think they were predominantly for skid steers, but they were basically made of like Lego. They kind of slotted together, and if you damaged a part, you popped that part out and you replaced it with another part. Could we not do the same with conveyor belts? I mean, the weight would be an issue, I guess, and maybe they'd be very expensive. But, you rip a conveyor belt, you're back to square one anyway. And going back to that point about when we're doing that mega mining thing, where you've got trucks stood idle, burning fuel, which goes back to the point. You remember I showed you those little autonomous electric trucks that Volvo have got going around their facility in Eskilstuna. So the idea is, I mean, I don't know how many trucks are on that mine that we showed you earlier, but where you maybe have 3, 4, 5 conventional big trucks, big haulers, their suggestion is that you have 12 or 15 of these little haulers, but it's a continuous cycle. Load gone, load gone, load gone, and charging as they go. They haul to the dump site, charge on their way through about 180 seconds apparently, and then they move on, and they're just literally constantly in motion. Is that not a better way? Ed Bartlett says, I've got Airboss wheels on my Case 960 rock wheel. Have you really? Haven't seen Airboss in bloody years, but they're good. I mean, I know they're not cheap, but then nor is a puncture. So yes, Airboss. I'm glad to hear Airboss are still around. They used to be a mainstay of the old SED and the early. I think SED. I'm not entirely sure if they ever made it over to Plantworks, but yeah, Airboss were a big deal. I think they actually won an SED award one year, an award for innovation, because it was an innovation, something from completely out of left field. What about buckets and attachments? Is dragging a piece of steel with a sharp edge or sharp teeth on the front really the best way of winning material or rock? Is there a better way than that? Is that the optimum design for that? If you went back and had a clean sheet of paper, would a bucket look like it does today? And have we moved with the times as well? That was one of the other things that struck me. There was a conversation going on earlier about quick couplers and tilt rotators. So we had an excavator. We've had excavators for decades. We've got an excavator, and we've had buckets for decades. And somewhere along the line, those clever Scandinavians said, you know what you need between those two? You need a quick coupler, or you need a tilt rotator. That didn't change the other bits. The excavator will have a bracket, and the bucket will have a bracket. But we've come along and said there's a bit that goes between those two now. Did anyone think we need to modify this? Excavators need to change their geometry a bit, or buckets need to change the way that they work because we've got this bit in between. Would that not have been a good idea? Just, asking for a friend. Let's have a look. Crystal says you can clip or vulcanize a belt to repair it. You can indeed. You can indeed. Dan Cullen says Develon changed their machines to a point, little differences. and I think therein lies the very hub, the very gist of my argument. They're little differences. They are, you know, a Dash 5 is not that much different to a Dash 4, and a Dash 6 is not much different to a Dash 5. And yes, as I say, you know, we might have a new engine in it that takes the emissions down a little bit, but by and large, side on, looking at it, a Dash 5 and a Dash 6 are pretty much precisely the same. When was the last time somebody went from, rather than a change, went a change? You know, something really turned it all on its head. And I genuinely can't think of the last time I saw that happen. I mean, I guess that the last one that I saw, in a manner of speaking, was probably the high-vis dumper from JCB. Primarily from an aesthetic point of view, they very much changed the way that a site dumper looked, but it also changed the weight distribution and the center of gravity. So, you know, for 50, 60, 70 years, we've had dumpers that looked a certain way, and they came along and went, no, we could do it like this. And now, in absolute truth, as far as I know, the high-vis dumper didn't take off. I don't even know if it actually offered anymore. But you did get the impression that somebody at JCB had looked at site dumpers and went, we could do that better. Rather than we can make a slight tweak. You know, we can give it a different ashtray. Or this time we'll add Bluetooth. Where are those big changes? And I wonder, I have an issue with writing in that I can't see my own mistakes. And I tend to write on the fly, so I just sit down and I write, and what I then read it back. It's like, yeah, okay, I could change that. But by and large, I can't see my own mistakes, and I come at it from a viewpoint, and my viewpoint is what you hear or what you read when I do my things. I reckon, I mean, even things like the thing that I've just read, you know, the thing about disruptors, if I were to give that to another writer or to give it to a sub-editor and say, have a look at that, I'm sure they would come at that from a different angle. If you look within manufacturers, even those that have got their secret skunk works where they're working on something really highfalutin, like a JCB or a Komatsu or a Volvo or whatever it might be, but they are constantly exposed to that thing that they did last year. You know, they walk into the factory and they walk past the model that they worked on last year. And that will largely, entirely influence precisely what they do next. Rather than, okay, you've done the Dash 6, screw up a piece of paper, throw it over your shoulder, here's a blank sheet of paper, pretend that doesn't exist, what you got? What can you come up with today? Would it look the same? Can you remember seeing pictures of a DX140 Doosan with independent quadrangle shaped tracks? If you have a look, Ed, quad tracks. Over the past 20 odd years, if anybody, and I know Doosan did it, but I've seen others do it. I think, I'm trying to remember who else did it. Doesn't matter. But if anybody has ever decided we're gonna produce either a concept machine or we're gonna mock up a concept machine, it's always on quad tracks. Always. Because it kind of looks futuristic and lunar landing type thing. Does that actually have scope? You know, is that actually a possibility? Is that something that would work in the real world? And you know, or are we too set in our ways, too conservative to actually consider that? Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I've seen a few machines, particularly over at ConExpo. There tends to be a couple of machines about. Is it the Truckzilla, the big massive telehandler that's available on quad tracks, and it's like something landed from Mars. It's completely out of left field, but better for it. But is it a real thing? Dan Carlin says, new addition to the family, Ed? Is there a new addition to the family, Ed? I can certainly see a little one in the picture there, but I don't know how old the picture is. So yes, there you are. That's enough of me waffling on anyway. What is it today? It's Thursday, right? Yeah. So last show of the week tomorrow, and then I've got the Monday from Hell next week. So bear with me on Tuesday. I may be just a little bit off my A game because I've got an absolute swine of a day on Monday. But all the better for it. Anywho, people, if you enjoyed that, please come back tomorrow. I will be putting the recap of this up on buymeacoffee.com/demolition news a little bit later today. I do need to make a few amends to my morning monologue before I put that up on the various platforms. Go and have a look. And if you've got any thoughts on that, please let us know. Also, the video that Jim Turner sent me earlier today, I'll drag that off of the platform and I'll put that on the show tomorrow. Yes, I remember seeing that telehandler at Connexpo. It was huge. It really is. Yeah, Truckzilla. If you want to go and have go and see a real man's telehandler. Truckzilla. Go and have a look at that over on YouTube. No, Gary, just an old photo. Just an old photo. Yes, that baby down to pit now. Yes, 45 years old. But Ed hasn't aged a day. I'll be seeing Ed in Balmer. I mean, I'd like to see him before, but I will certainly be seeing him at Balmer. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to a good old chinwag and a catch up. Ed, great to have you back on the show as always. Everybody, go and have a fine and splendid day. Look after yourselves. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, which leaves you a fair degree of scope. Until I see you again, have a good one. All the best.